Let me just share my screen. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. And I thought that when we started the new term, it's better for me to be here, just to sort of remind you of what I could do for you. And hopefully you can see my Moodle page now. And so for some people who just newly joined, this is the page that you can find me and book a one-to-one tutorial outside of your timetable classes. If you click in and yes, loading and scroll down, you don't need to worry about all of these and to see the button book with me. So that will take you to my booking page where you can see all the available slots. Yeah. At the beginning of the term, it's not that busy, but I tend to get a peak, like yes, the peak time tend to be the before the coursework submission. So I suggest you do not wait late. Try to solve the problem and issue as soon as it's raised. Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully those people I've seen from the first term found my tutorial helpful, and feel free to come back to me. And for those people might need the other support from me, more than welcome. All right. In the sessions, I can just run through some examples given by Nadim, and do the practical exercise, the worksheet together. And if you want, I can give you further questions to solve. And also I run a drop-in session, my own drop-in session. You can find the information around here. Yeah, it's a Wednesday between 2 and 3. There's no need to book, and you can just join in anytime in the hour. Yeah, I think this is all I wanted to say, Nadim. Oh
Okay.
yeah, if you have any questions, just drop me a line in email. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much,
Mm.
Shah, for that. And for those who were just arriving when Shah was speaking, it's for one-to-one support from Shah to help you with Java. Given everything I said yesterday about the difficulty of Java versus Python, it's really worth your while to get in touch with her quite early, especially if you're not confident or completely unfamiliar.
Yeah.
Just to help, you'd agree, wouldn't you? Just to help you
Yeah.
get started, so you start well and you start with as much support as you can get. Excellent. Right. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Shah.
Thank
So
you.
I'm recording this session. So the way that I want to, hang on, we got a question. Do we have a question at all? Okay, no. So I'm recording this session, and this is how I'm going to structure this one. In the first 10 minutes, what I'm generally going to do in the lectures, first 5-10 minutes, is give you some updates, some notices, some tips, or whatever relevant to the course itself, where we are, what we're trying to do. And I'd appreciate as many people as possible who came to that. For the remainder of this session, what I'm going to do is actually code with IntelliJ. Now, some of you in the audience are already really confident. So I'm going to say to you, if this looks straightforward to you, you can do it in parallel, actually. You can go, but I'm not sure where you'd go because we're all in lockdown. So saying you can go might not be the most useful thing to say. I'll tell you the problem I'm going to do. I've gone back to week 2 from the Python, and I'm going to create or replicate the distance between 2 points problem that Matthew did. And also for the group exercises in your practicals, I'm also going back to week 2, and I've selected a handful of exercises you did in Python as part of that worksheet, and you're going to do them in your group work in the practical for 2 good reasons. First reason, you'll have a Python version of it already, hopefully. So you'll have got your head around roughly what's going on. By us doing it in Java, it should help you see the similarities and differences and help the transition into the different languages. Okay, so what I'm going to do in a minute is share the screen. As I say, this is recorded. Please interrupt me. I'll keep the chat window open. feel free to get IntelliJ installed and work at the same time. But that may be really tricky. If you're working on a laptop, I think that's probably going to be very tricky for you. But I do want to make this a little bit more interactive rather than I just talk. So feel free both to speak and also to put comments in, ask questions as I go along. So my aim really is to take the example of the distance between 2 points and code it, but along the way, show you how you can do and manage your projects in IntelliJ, show you what that Tab9 plugin does and other stuff like that. For those of you who are reasonably confident, you can sit parallel to this and code it yourself and keep one ear and listen to what I'm saying and see whether what I produce is similar to what you produce. You're welcome to do that. If you want to ask me a question, feel free to interrupt at any time. And I'm happy to pause and stop. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to try to make this, let's have a look. Can you see, let's just get the chat window back up because it disappears when you share. Can you just confirm to me, folks, that you can see this window here, the one that I'm moving on? Is that the one you can see?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so IntelliJ, as I said, with Java and with programming, however abstract and theoretical everything becomes, you really want to just write code and get comfortable and understand how to write the code and what this environment will do. Okay, so we're going to do a new project and I'm going to try to answer a couple of questions along the way. I think Robert asked one, someone asked one, I think, in an email and in the chat yesterday, and I couldn't answer it. And one of those questions was, how do I make sure I don't keep on creating new projects every time I want to start every week? So that's one thing I'm going to show you straight away. But I do want to point out to the students who've already got Java experience, there is a really nice, JavaFX is a kind of desktop graphical user interface system, but Android is built inside IntelliJ, belongs to the IntelliJ family. It's sort of, it's derived from it. So you can create, if you're interested and you've had an idea about an app, mobile app, we might have briefly mentioned this before, then you should practice and have a go at it. I mean, it's a very, very good and straightforward environment. Let's get back to Java. Project SDK, this screen I don't have to do anything with. We'll go to the next one. I'm going to create project from template. Again, that gives you the command line app. If I go too fast, please, ask me to, do whatever you want to do in parallel. It is, so Stefan, Android Studio is a separate development environment, actually is the IntelliJ platform's Android Studio development just ripped out and stands on its own. So I tend to encourage students to install IntelliJ and do it all within IntelliJ. I have a second year module, we teach Android Studio, well, we teach mobile development, and so we do it like that. You can use Visual Code. Interesting thing, if we got IntelliJ installed, yes, you can use them in parallel. Visual Code won't be as useful to you, and I'll see if I can show you why. But if you're an experienced Java and a competent programmer, that's your decision. Okay, so project name, let's just call this, I'm going to call this whole project exercises, okay? Give it a sensible name. This is saving in a folder where I was looking at a second year's pieces of work. So I'm just going to go to a folder where I keep all my programs in. Let's save it into there. And the base package is, if you like, the folder in which your code sits. And I've called it My Files, and I'll show that to you in a second. If I miss your comments and it's important, please say something and just interrupt me. Okay, so this gives you your basic starting point. A couple of things to notice is, well, the project window, if you click that, it'll pop open and expand the project window. Now, let me answer a question that someone asked the other day, which was, every week, I don't want to be doing this, creating a new project. I want to create one project, and basically all of my code, I want to sit inside that same project. And this is not what I'm looking at. Hang on a second, I've come to the wrong thing. Right, I'm going to just redo that because that looks like that's opened up, right? New project. That looked like that actually opened up a previous project, which is not what I really want to do. I want a blank project, right? Okay, that's better. Untitled, I'm just going to call it untitled and open it there. There we go. So what you get if you open the untitled project is the SRC, short for source. You might recognize that tag from web pages. In there, you'll see a folder called My Files, and you'll notice at the top of your Java files, you'll see this thing called Package My Files. It's a way that the project organizes its files. So if you create subfolders and you move stuff around, it's a very, very good way of, it manages all that for you. Now, I've had a couple of problems this week and I'll just point them out. Never go in and rename something yourself. Always right-click it, go to Refactor, Rename. And the reason we do that is I'm going to call this exercise 1, this class. Okay, and I'll explain why I'm calling it exercise 1 in a second. The reason that you refactor it is if you can see through the shared exercise 1, it's changed the name of the file. So the name of the class, the name of the file, and over here in the project window should all be the same. If you can get tab 9 in VS Code, then you'll get advantages from using tab 9. Absolutely, that sounds great. Do that. Tab 9, and hopefully I can demonstrate some features of tab 9 to you to make your life a bit easier. Okay, yeah, I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to development environments. For new students, I'm sticking to IntelliJ because it's very, very useful and you'll be able to use it next year. For those who've already got prior experience in VS Code, you're going to find it's fine to stick with it. And if you can get the tab 9 code completion, that will accelerate your code. Yeah, that's absolutely right, Rupert. It does autocomplete and it saves, if it autocompletes full lines of code, and it's very clever because it can see the structure of your code, and hopefully I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of that. Okay, so the question I was asked was, okay, this exercise here, if you come up to here, it's currently saying main because it hasn't updated the connection. Let me just run this in a moment. Let me run it. And when you run it, it always takes a little bit longer, but the name of the class, and inside that class, I have this thing called, and there's nothing going on. So it's just run an empty, let me bring that closer, that screen over so I can see your comments a bit better. There's nothing in there at the moment, okay? I've just run it just to make sure. Now, you might want to do 10 or 15 exercises, and you might want to build, say, all the exercises from a worksheet into the same thing. So this is what you might want to do. In the source folder, you right-click it, you go new, go package, and call, say, I don't know, worksheet 1, and it effectively creates a folder. And if I can show you on your hard disk, just so you understand what's going on here, you have to, where is it? Idea. I call this untitled, so it's a fairly useless name of a project. But if you look inside my project, under my files, no, that's a different one. That's because I've named them so badly. Right, okay, but it basically replicates the structure of the files you see here on your hard disk. Under worksheet 1, I can put all my exercises. So if I want to put this exercise under worksheet 1 rather than lecture 1, what I would do is I would drag it into that folder, and then it pops open this window and it refactors. You always press refactor. It's a really critical word in what we do. You never, yeah, just use refactor. And you refactor it, what it will do is it will reposition your file, and you'll notice it's changed the package, i.e. the folder it's sitting within. So it manages all of that. Now let's just say that you want to do 3 exercises. So you want another exercise. So you go to your source folder, you do new, you grab another Java class, and you call this one exercise 2, right? Or whatever else you want to call it. You'll notice, first of all, that the class is completely empty. And so the easiest way to do it is just grab the first line of that, go to your exercise 2, pop it in there, and there's a nice little trick. If you add a curly bracket and hit enter, it adds the closing curly bracket. If you ever want to know where the beginning and ending of things are, you click one and it'll highlight the end of it at the same time. Refactor means rename. It means refactor, how can I put it? In this setting, what it does is it allows you essentially to change not just the name, but all the internal connections for files, variables. So for example, if you rename a variable, and anyone who's using that variable in any part of the code, the refactor process will make sure all of those other uses of it are correctly updated. So is a class like program as a whole in Python? Yes, it is like a program in a whole, that's it. But don't worry about the word class yet. We're going to worry about that in week 4 when we start talking about objects more carefully. Public static void actually do. All right, so that's a great question, David. So let's see if my environment is behaving correctly. Let me drag exercise 2 into worksheet 1. So now I've got 2 separate public static main voids. So what does public static void main mean? Well, the easiest, hopefully the easiest right click Azamat, right click the source folder, new Java class, it create, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Declan. Okay, so what does it mean? Well, when you run an application, it always has to start somewhere in your code. Okay, so it's called an entry point in your code. Whenever you run an application, the application must have an automatic starting point. That's a very good question. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. To that, Stefan. So the way that programs work is that, good point, Kieran. Public static void main is a piece of legacy code that goes all the way back to the language of C. And in the language of C, it was always the starting point of any application you wrote. So whenever you ran it, the program would automatically default to a public static main. It would find it. Where's your public static main? It would say, I'm going to run from there. Okay, so if you have 2 of them, obviously the question is, which one are you going to run? And it's quite, if my environment behaves correctly, when I hit play, this one here, you can test this out, but generally there's a right click and it will allow you to run that one if you want to run it. Well, we can test them out. We can test them out. Let's make this one in exercise 2. Now, okay, so I've written, I want to print out a line, okay? That's absolutely right. Yeah, void means no return, nothing's coming back. You're just releasing control. Okay, do you notice I typed the word system, and before I've typed anything else, tab 9 has given me, it's assumed I want to print a line out. It's given me literally the whole line of code. So I can just select it. Now, there are 2 ways of selecting. You can use down arrows and the tab key, or you can use your mouse. I worked with an IBM experienced coder. He never used his mouse for anything. So I got into the habit of encouraging students also to use their arrow keys on their keyboard, select it, and then hit the tab character. It's basically inserted the whole line. In this case, it hasn't actually put the semicolon at the end of the line. Yeah, absolutely. That's another really good shortcut. Okay, so let's just say this is exercise 1, and let's do the same thing for exercise 2. Let's pop one in there and see which one it will run. Right, okay, so I'm going to come into here and I'm going to save. Now that's gone red. Don't want to get too distracted. If I run it, it will be, let's see, is defaulted to exercise 1. Now you can get the second one to run, and for some reason, maybe it's just, there we go. In order to run one of the static main blah, blah, blahs, you click anywhere inside it, right click it and go down, and you can run that main function. So if you click it, it'll run that one instead. So what's the advantage? Well, each of your exercises can be separate kept separate from each other, in that you can create a bunch of server code in the back end and use them in 2 different clients. Think of the main as your client as well. Could I repeat that? Okay, yes. So if I just, in the top up here, I don't know if you've noticed. Okay, let's go back to what I said. I'm in exercise 1, which was the first one I created. And at the top, it automatically, when I just hit the play, it automatically, as we can see from what's been output, ran that one. Okay. But I want to have multiple starting points in my program because I want different places to start and test out. So with my exercise 2, I've also got a static. So it's another potential starting point of my app. And in this way, you can combine all your code. I'll show you in time. So to get this to run, if I right click inside the body of the main, sometimes it appears on the bar down the side, and scroll down, you'll see it says run exercise 2, which is the name of this file. It's also the name of the class, .main. Hit that, and it will execute my code from there. What it will do is ignore that starting point, and it will give me that starting point. Hopefully that's a bit clearer. Okay, so, okay. Do you have Delaware? Okay, I'll let you help each other out while you're doing it. If you want me to help answer a question, I will. Okay, so tab 9, that's a tiny little bit of introduction. So as I said, in the group exercises next week, what I'm going to do is I'm selected a whole small set of group of programs, simple programs, which you did in week 2, I think it was. I've kept the ones that have loops and if statements out of sight, so you can concentrate on just what you're covering in the session. Where can you see what groups we're in? Matthew, that's a really good question. I have those sheets. I could give you view access to them, and you could search through them and see where you're going to be. So Matthew, if you ping me an email, I can tell you that. You'll see how the groups are all set up. Okay, cool. So let's make this actually do something. Let's not just output something, but I'm going to start in a slightly odd way. Okay, so this is for our newbies. This is for the people who've never done Java before, and they still might find that whole line incredibly long and complex and pointless. Whereas in Python, you just wrote one word, print. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just replace that and have that, the word print? Okay, if I try to run it, it's going to complain. And let's hear what complaint it will make. It will say, I can't find that symbol. What is this thing called print that you have there? I don't know what that means. Okay, so that's quite a good message. So I'm going to create a helper function. And this is a trick to also helping you understand how languages like Python, what they have going on underneath them. In order to do that, you see this main. If I go to the curly bracket there, you'll see that the end of the main is down here where it's highlighted in yellow. So I need to hit enter immediately after into the gap. This curly bracket is related to the class at the top. Your code always has to sit between these 2 points, if you can see them in yellow, but it doesn't have to sit inside this method. It sits outside that method, but inside the class. So I'm going into this space here. So watch what I do. I'm going to write public static void, because I'm not going to return anything in here, and I'm going to create a function called print. And what this function is going to do, tab 9 is quite clever, is I am the line. Okay, now some of this should be familiar from Python. Let me hit, I've done my curly bracket, I hit enter, so it created the end of it. So what does this say? That's the name of the function. That's the parameter I'm passing it. So if I pass it a string, okay, inside this print, all I'm going to do is the system out print line. Now this is where tab 9 starts becoming clever. The very first code completion option, it knows that I'm passing in a string, and I've written systems, so it's worked out, are you trying to print something? Okay, that's that line you actually need to put in. So you just select that, and it saves you having to write the whole thing out. Okay. So as I say, go back through the video if you want to I will keep going at a reasonably fast pace because I know you can pause the video. I'm also now going to do something else. I'm basically putting it all onto one line. This is something we could never do really effectively in, no, string with a bracket, Remy, is an array. That means that you're holding multiple values. You only need to hold a string, like a sentence. Think of string like a sentence. Why do you write string twice? String. Okay, that's just because I'm being lazy. Okay, so that's just my name for the string. It isn't, no, it's just the name. So, okay, that might confuse people. str confuses, so what shall I call it? Shall I just say, I don't know, well, give me a name for it instead. Jeff. I like that. I think I like message. I think message makes a lot more sense. Now, if I'm going to change it there, I've got to change it there. Now, do you notice that that line of code goes between the two curly brackets? And this all sits on one line. Now, that's quite unusual. In Python relies on carriage returns every time and indenting. Java doesn't. Java just uses the semicolon, and it has this square, this squiggly bracket to say that's the body of your function. So here's a function we have just written. I've just written. And I'd recommend you write it because it will save you a lot of coding. Although tab 9 helps you, this is a really efficient way. You'll see there's a theme that will help you when we actually start doing objects. Okay. Okay. Right. So I've now got a print function. You pass it a string message and it will run that line of code. So now instead of writing in my main, let's get this out of sight for the time being, because we don't really need to keep on worrying about it. Okay. And remember that code is inside the yellow squigglies, right? Did I say squigglies? That might sound a bit cringe, sorry. Okay, I can now use the word print because that's a function I've just created to save myself having to write system out print line. However efficient system out print line is, it's a mechanism and it's not a concept. The concept is you want to output it. Some of you might think the word print is not such a good one. Maybe the word output would be better. Okay, all right, yeah, we'll call them squigglies then. Right, so now if I run this very, very quickly, it's just going to print it and give it a second. There we go. Right, it's really basic. It's not anything. So that's going to save me some time. We're going to use this kind of strategy throughout, because if you follow this strategy of kind of creating little helper functions, which do bits of code in the same file, the advantage is that it will help you make the transition into the more difficult concepts we have. So this is the critical concept that you're going to hit in week 4. And I know I'm trickling it in quite early, but let me just do that. That's the concept. We want to print it, i.e. we want to pop it out on the console, okay? That body, that line of code there, which is the system out print line, is what you call a mechanism. That's how you do it in Java. And so I want you to keep in mind what it is you're trying to do and separate it from how to do it. If you keep that distinction constantly in your mind, you'll hear me echo it a lot. When we come to objects and this thing called object-oriented programming, you'll realize how useful and straightforward it is. There's kind of a natural progression. Okay, so we said we wanted to write a program where we were going to input x1, x2, y1, y2. Some of you might remember this, and if you can remember, while I'm coding, have a go and code it, okay? But I will try to get the whole thing done in the next 15 minutes quickly. You get the 2 points, the x1, x2, and there's a simple formula to calculate the distance between 2 points. You did it in week 2. Feel free to jump back and find that on the Moodle page if you want to. How to get text prompts to come along with my input. Right, Hector, you're on the next question. Okay, so you can't, but you do it in artificial. In Java, you have to do it in 2 steps. First of all, you have to print. You have to have a print statement and you have to say, or, an output statement. You say, please enter. I'm just going to do this in steps, X1, okay? Then you need a way of getting the input. Now, how do you get input? So this is a piece of code that you will end up using a lot. And I'll go a little bit slower. and then I'm going to make a very slight change. There's a code called a scanner. A scanner is, and it's very helpfully tried to complete the line for me. So I just grabbed the first one, but I'm not going to use scanner here. I'm going to use input. Okay. And there's a slight change I have to put inside here. And let me explain this rather obscure line to you. Scanner is a component that lets you get input from files, from consoles, and from different sources, okay? Input is the name of the object that I am building. So think of it like this. I've got a component and I want to use it. To use it, I need to create an object, a kind of component that I can use inside my code. So I give it a name, and on the other side, I write new, and new means I'm creating my component to use in my code. That might be really obscure. We don't have anything like that in Python, but I would just say it. Yeah, it will. That's a very, very good point, Stefan. That line, watch what it should do. If I try to run this, it should complain and automatically insert that in for me. Okay, so I've created it. If I try to run it, it should complain. There it does. It doesn't know what scanner is. And if it's behaving correctly, there should be a nice little red arrow. And for some reason, it's not behaving correctly. So that's not very, very helpful. What it normally does is by it, you get a little red warning message. You click on it and it will do what Stefan has just passed in the chat. And what you do is you need to import, as you had import statements in Python, you need to import the tools. Util is short for utilities. Okay, so when you add something, always get used to hitting run regularly. It guarantees that you can see it's just asking for an X value, right? It says, please enter X1. So it means that, you know, I've correctly loaded it up. It's just a good practice. Okay, so I think it was Kobe's question, or was it? No, it's Hector's question. How do I actually get input? So what you do is there are two elements here. Okay, when you get your input, you need to store it somewhere. And just like Python, you would say have a variable called x1, right? Notice I type in x1 and it cleverly knows what I'm up to. But we're in Java. And in Java, before you create a new variable to store a piece of information, you always have to write the type of data you are storing. So if I'm getting whole numbers, in this case, I'm going to assume that actually technically I should be able to get fractions or what are called doubles, right? You have to define the variable. Now, here's an interesting thing. A double is a different type of variable type. What it means, it can store very large decimal-based numbers. Okay, so if I type in double, you'll notice tab 9, very cleverly, it said double x1 input next double. It's given me the whole line, the input line. That piece there, immediately after input, if I just manually do it, if you hit dot, you have a whole series of, and it's probably important for you to see this. You've got next double, you've got next byte, you've got next this, next int, next long, next line, I think somewhere in there for string input. It's language. Let me just get that back. It's the language that this component uses to grab a decimal point value when you say, please enter x1. Yeah, next. It used to be next line as well, but what's this? Hasn't radix got something to do with sorting out? Yes, quite possibly. Okay, so in answer to your question, you need both lines. So you need 4 of those pairs of lines. So here, before I copy and paste 4 pairs of those lines and fill my main up with all these mechanisms, why don't I create a helper function where I give it this prompt and it returns the type of data I want, okay? That's a concept I'm hoping you're familiar with in Python. So let's do that. Because I'm in this place, I'm going to write static var, and it's not going to be void this time. I'm going to return a double. And what should I call my function? Should we just say get double input? Get double from console. That's a decent name. Remember the names of your get inputs. You could use get inputs. Here's the thing to bear in mind. Try to name your functions the concept of what they're trying to do. Even if it's slightly lengthier, it's much, much healthier. At this point, would you recommend us doing functions as public or private? Okay, before you hit anything, and you stick to this model, do everything publicly, okay? When we come to objects, there's a very subtle shift. There is a slight risk in me doing all the static stuff with you, and I'll explain what static actually means in a minute. No, null is different from void, Martin. Void means empty, null means nothing. It's a really subtle but important difference between the two. So excellent question. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it a prompt, right? And inside here, I'm going to grab those two lines. So instead of, I'm going to grab my prompt, and instead of that hard-coded text, it's going to print that prompt. Notice, yeah, so that's general. That's going to get the double, but I don't need to store it. I can just simply return it. Okay. So, and that's the return type. Okay. Yeah, it is painful, but if you bear with it, it will work. Right now, so I've got this thing called get double from console. You give it the prompt and you get back the double. Okay, let's use it. So how would I use it? Well, I don't need that line anymore, right? And I don't need the input line anymore, but there's a question we're going to come to in a second. Let me just grab that. I'm going to use it. And what do I need to say? Send to it? I send it, I just say X1, right? That's what I want it to do. Get double from console. Does that not make more sense than those two lines of code? I think it probably does. So this helper function helps you focus your program on the concept of what you're trying to do, and the mechanisms of how it's doing it are hidden from view, or out of the way. Okay, so there's only one problem. Down here, if I run it, input is sitting inside this function, but input was declared out here. How on earth is it going to see it? I think that was that looks like, Zachary, that's your question. Let's let it throw the error. There we go. What it's saying, and here's the thing about this environment. If you click where the error is, it will take you to the actual line where it's got a problem. It is very useful the way that the errors are thrown. Even if you don't understand the stuff in red, if you click the line here, you know, in blue, it'll take you and say, hang on a second, input, what's input? So here's an interesting thing you can do. Why do I need to declare it out there? Why do I need it out there if I'm only going to use it inside these functions? So let's cut it from there. And whenever I need to use them, let's pop them inside here. Okay, so now have a look at how this program is looking. We don't need our print X1 anymore. Okay, so first step. I'm receiving that nice little function, tells me what it's doing. It's going to give me X1. How easy is it just to make sure I get all my inputs? You would have noticed this with your get. So I want X1, I want X2, well, I want Y1, and I want Y2. Okay, Y2. Okay, that's, oops, 2. And so I need to change the corresponding variable. They're all double. They're all going to take decimal values. Y1 and Y2. There we go. 4 simple, straightforward lines to do that. What you can't do, Python does something very nice where it allows you to return 4 separate variables. You don't have that in this environment. Okay, so hopefully I answered your question. So what's nice is that this general helper function I can use for every single piece of data I need. Okay, so that's my input sorted. Now that's a strategy that I would recommend you start doing. I mean, you can build up your helper functions and copy and paste them into whichever file you want them. And you could even import them from another file, but at this stage, I wouldn't necessarily overcomplicate it. A little bit of copying and pasting initially, later on you can change it. So it's almost 1:45, and this is kind of taking a lot longer. If you put the scanner line in the class, would all the functions be able to access it? That is a brilliant question. So what Tom has asked, you see, I've declared and stated what it is here. If I don't declare it in here, watch this. Yeah, there's a couple of things you need to do if you're going to do it your way. Right, I'm going to cut it out of here and I'm going to break it into 2 parts. So what Tom has said, if you look at that first squiggly bracket immediately after class, and if I pop into here, into that space, that part of it, right? Hang on. Right? Now, by putting it there, it gets, as Tom correctly points out, it gives, that can now be used in any of the functions inside this exercise 1 class. The only thing missing is that I need to actually create an object from it, and we don't create it in that place. We have to create it here. So what we do is we drop that and we do it like that. What that means is the very first line in my main is it will create my input object, right, ready for use. Because I've declared it up here, declare means that I've defined what variable type it is and given it a name. Because it's up there on line 7, it's now visible across every function inside here, as long as that's inside. See that yellow squiggly bracket? As long, can you see that at the top it says public class exercise 1? There are 2 yellow squigglies, as I call them. As long as your functions are inside those 2, it will make it accessible. So Tom, I really like that idea. Let's stick to that. Okay. So you can create objects in the class. No, you try. Yeah, you can. What you call this is called declaring the variable. Let me just make this clear. You declare the variables here, right? And if you want every function to use it, and this is very crucial to what we do, but when you actually want to use it, you always have to build it inside the main in this situation. But when we come to objects in week 4, you build it in something called the constructor. Okay, but I don't want to jump ahead too much. Okay, and get them to rename the brace, the squiggly. Yeah, let's have a change.org petition. Right, okay, now I've only done the input and I've spent quite a lot of time. We've got about 10, just under 10 minutes. So let me write the formula out. So what's the solution? The result, the distance, hang on, I'm just going to write it as a concept, is math dot square root. I think you can actually, not meth, I think you can actually write square root. You can. SQRT is available in Java, so you don't have to worry about importing the maths library. And then you're going to pop it into there. But here's the problem. Has anyone noticed? I've just said distance. That's a Python trick. I haven't said what type of data, right? So I need to always make sure I stick that at the beginning. If I don't, it will complain. And you can see the complaint and understand what the... Okay, so it's going to be the distance. So what's the calculation? The calculation, let's break it down. I only did this with a handful of students in Python, but I'm just going to break it down. If I create a double, let's call it dx, and that's the difference between the x's, right? Some of you might remember this, and I create a dy, which is the difference between the y's, y1 minus 2. Why would I want to do this? I'm only doing this just to make it clearer how it double, Muhammad, is you had float before, I think, in Python. You have integers for whole number, floats, but floats aren't as precise as a double. A double allows you much larger and greater precision. It's used heavily in engineering programming, much greater. So think about the value pi, 3.14159.254, etc., etc. Okay, yeah, and the print statement especially, absolutely, string value of right, Hector, that's spot on. We'll get to that. Okay, so anyway, this helps break down the problem. Where was I? So we had one which and what did we do? I can't remember the formula. Who can remember the formula? Who's actually done the formula while I've been talking and wants to type it into the thing to speed us up?
It's the square root of x2 minus x1 to the power of 2.
Yeah, so they're, okay.
Minus y1 to the power of 2. Yeah,
so they're squared. Now, I can't remember what the square function is in, so I'm just going to guess, right? So let's just, let's not overcomplicate it. So what I'll do is I'll square that. Bracket round there very, very quickly. And the square, I don't know if you can do this. I'm just going to write it and see whether I've been working on a second year module on functional programming, and my brain is a little bit fast. Let's see whether it complains if I do that. Hang on, what's it complaining about? Input. Oh yes, Tom, there is one downside. Thank you very much who's written it in there. See the scanner input. this is the only downside of this mechanism. What Tom has actually shown us is how you would do it in a proper object. Because this is what's called a static context, and that's something I need to explain very briefly, it doesn't like this very, very much. It tends to get whiny and whingy about it. So rather than spend ages getting distracted by it, what I'm going to actually do is do it the alternative way, cut that temporarily out, but keep that thought in mind and just dump it into here, only because we're running out of time. There is something quite annoying about the static. What does static mean? From your practical point of view, static is a way of saying I have no state. Okay, hang on. New scanner under exercise 1. You can try it, experiment with it. Let me just grab the code. Did you, Azamat, did you actually try that code? I think it's okay with it. And then we just add those together, don't we? dx plus dy. And then just as Hector correctly said, I want to print that distance, right? So if I put distance in there like that, the very first thing that a complaint it will have will be, hang on, distance, what are you giving me distance for? Because I want a string. I don't want distance. This is one difference between this and Python. Python doesn't hassle you with all this type of stuff. Can you just do public static scanner, new scanner in under exercise word? Excellent. Yes, you can. You can do that, public static. Okay. I'm going to stick. Okay. The only thing to be said, Christian, about that is that it does work, but it's an artificial way, and it could potentially lead us down the wrong path. But if you're happy to do it, stick with that. I'm going to stick with this. I'll tell you why. When you look at web programming and a site like Amazon, who deal with 500,000 per microsecond hits on their server, they tend to use the logic I have here. They create the object, they do what they need with the object, and when it goes outside of this bracket, it basically deletes the object. And that's a web savvy way of coding. So that's an alternative way of thinking about it. And you'll find that for those who are more interested in web and how that impacts, yeah, okay, right. So is that going to work? Should we just run it to see what happens? Oh, hang on, second time. Oh, we didn't like that. Let's have a look. Yes, so those binary operator first is thing. So what is it? Let me have a look. It's not SQR, math dot. Let's have a look. We've got a whole bunch of math functions. I think is SQ or power. Let's have a quick look what the function is. And look at the way that I'm coding. There it is, power. Right. So power, I think power is the right one. Hasn't actually given me much information. I'll just check there isn't an SQR for it. No, there's a square root. So let's try power. I think power is probably the most logical one. The first variable, the first pair of brackets, and it's going to be raised to the power 2. Right? Now notice how I'm coding it. I'm using the environment to help me work out what I should do. So I know it's the maths library. I hit dot, and it's actually very helpfully tab 9 has spotted what I'm up to and gives me the code completion. So I'm reasonably confident. But notice I use the environment. I ask the environment, what's the right bit of code? And it helps me out. Okay, so let's run that. Oh, still not happy with the line here. Oh, what's going on here? Cannot find method sqrt. Okay, I think I'm missing this, the math dot, right? It sounds like that's where the problem is with that. So let's make sure we put math in and it knows it's the maths. And now we have a really good one. We have the incompatible type. So this was Hector's point really early on, which was this. If I click on it, you'll see it there. It's highlighting that value and it's saying this is incompatible types. Doubles cannot be converted to string. Now, some of you might scream at this point and say, but Python let us do all this stuff and it looked after us. It did indeed. And scream as long as you need to scream, folks. Scream and cringe at the same time because you might want to scream at me saying squiggly just to try to cheer you up. Okay. What Hector pointed out is the fact that this is asking for a string and this is a different type of data. How do you convert between the two? I like that, Sophie. Right. Well, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do this as a separate line distance as string. Now, you don't have to do this, but I want to just show you how you do it. If you type in string and you press, it's done it already for me. There's this thing called a value of here. If I click that, what that bit there does is it converts the double into a string format, and then I can use distance as string in here. So there we go. And I just grab it and drop it into here, if that makes sense, right? That's taken the double, it's converted it. You have to do a lot of this type of stuff. So start screaming, don't stop until you're out of breath and you want to just sleep. And after the pain of this type of Java thing that it does. Okay, let's run it. Okay, x1, I don't know what valid. X2, I'm going to put 1 and 3 and 3, and it said it's 0. Clearly the difference is not 0, so there it is. Yes, tab 9 is, what is it, screams at incredible volume, good one, right? Yeah, so there's obviously some error because there is clearly a distance here. So somewhere in there, my maths isn't quite right. But because we've run out of time, I think that would be a nice one for you to fix if you get time over the weekend. So you just put 1, 3, 1, 3. Oh, didn't I? Yes, because I did that is right. Thank you for spoiling. I thought I did X, Y pairs, but I did X. You're absolutely right. So X2 needs to be 3, Y1 needs to be 1, and Y2 needs to be 3. Thank you for spotting there wasn't an error in my code, but I was happy to assume that I'd made a typo. And if I'd had more time, I would have shown you how a lengthy way of kind of fixing this problem. That's quite a good exercise. It's worth you going back, watching this video and doing a thank you for the screaming. Right. I hope you found that productive. You got it working. Well done, Kobe. Anyone else code while I was doing this? How do we get on? Anyone else? Yep, cool. Excellent. Excellent. For those who didn't, we'll do this regularly in this, and I'll chat with you through the window. Worksheet 2 hurts. Okay, Ethan. Oh, Ethan, incidentally, I've managed to move you. Hopefully you got the message. Decimal format we avoid. You generally don't need to worry. Yeah, okay. We'll come back to all those string formatting stuff later, as and when we need it. But here's a different approach to programming. You are going to try stuff out, but the environment with tab 9 and all the rest of it should help you. Should help you. For those who didn't manage to code, I would recommend you use this video to pause and code it yourself. Check that it works. In the group exercises, as I say, I've selected a bunch of exercises from week 2. For you to just share it out amongst your small group and just make sure you're happy with it. Tab 9, absolutely, I agree with you entirely, Kobe. It is, I'm really pleased with it, and very, very helpful for us in terms of helping you code. This strategy, just to summarize, of creating your own helper functions, I used a lot last year, and I've started with it because hopefully it will help. Okay, right, so if anyone has any other problems related to their installation, they can hang around. But for the rest of you, have a good weekend, and hopefully you'll all be in your groups. I will check the setting to allow you to move between groups just in case something goes wrong. And I will wait at the beginning of practicals to open the rooms to give you time to arrive as well. Thanks a lot, folks. Enjoy your weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. Okay.